The resignation of Justin Welby as Archbishop of Canterbury was meant, which is to be effective in January, was meant to signal accountability and renewal. And I presume the original intention was that he would get through Christmas and then depart with a certain amount of honour. But none of that is to happen. He's being hidden away at Christmas. He won't be giving his Christmas address. He won't be presiding over Christmas services and so on. And his speech in the House of Lords yesterday serves as a troubling testimony to why his departure cannot come soon enough. Far from bringing closure to the Church of England's darkest chapter, Welby's frivolous tone, his lack of contrition, his levity about the abuse the victims have suffered reveals a leader disconnected from the gravity of his office. And the Smith scandal is not merely an historical failing, it's a living wound, reopened by the Mackin report, which details the Church's negligence, including Welby's personal and moral responsibility. Yet in addressing this profound failure, Welby began with jokes about his diary secretary and the hilarity of making plans. Survivors of abuse, some of whom have faced lifelong trauma and even attempted suicide, were left in disbelief. Mark Stibb, himself a survivor, described the Archbishop's frivolous tone, while yet another survivor known as Graham noted with disgust that Welby expressed pity for his staff, not for his victims. When Welby declared that a head had to roll over the Smith scandal, his own, it was as though he was narrating a tragicomedy rather than invoking the reality. And when he was talking about the fate of a 14th century predecessor who was beheaded, such levity is not only inappropriate but deeply offensive. Survivors are not an audience to be entertained, nor are their stories mere props in Welby's resignation theatre. This moment required solemnity, reflection, remorse. It required Welby to look directly at the survivors and say, "I failed you." Instead, he chose deflection, not reflection, not genuflection, questioning the scope of responsibility, despite the Mackin's report's clarity that he could and should have acted to prevent further abuse. It's as though the Archbishop now seeks to rewrite his legacy, even as it unravels, and the institutional culture that enabled the crimes to take place in the first place and then covered them up is not a relic of the past. Survivors rightly call for more resignations, demanding that all who were complicit step down, yet Welby's remarks suggest a church still preoccupied with protecting its reputation over prioritising justice and healing. The reaction within the church has been equally revealing. The Bishop of Newcastle, the Reverend Dr. Helen Ann Hartley, condemned Welby's tone. That's one of his own, lamenting a culture that silences critics and trivialises suffering. Other bishops, astonishingly, were seen laughing at Welby's jokes in the House of Lords, a grim reminder of how deep this disconnect runs.
My lords, it is often said, and it is a cliche to say it, but hey, I'm the Archbishop still, that if you want to make God laugh, make plans. Well, on that basis, next year I will be causing God more hilarity than anyone else for many years, because the plans for next year were very detailed and extensive. If you pity anyone, pity my poor diary secretary, who's seen weeks and months of work disappear in a puff of a resignation announcement. The reality, which I wish to start with and then pay some thanks and then talk about housing. The reality is that there comes a time, if you are technically leading a particular institution or area of responsibility, where the shame of what has gone wrong, whether one is personally responsible or not, must require a head to roll. And there is only, in this case, one head that rolls well enough. I hope not literally. One of my predecessors in 1371, Simon of Sudbury, had his head cut off, and it was then the peasants, the revolting peasants at the time, played football with it at the Tower of London. I don't know who won. It certainly wasn't Simon of Sudbury. the reality is that the safeguarding and care of children and vulnerable adults in the Church of England today is thanks to thousands and tens of thousands of people across the church, particularly in parishes, in parish safeguarding officers, is a completely different picture to the past. And however, when I look back at the last 50 or 60 years, not only through the eyes of the Making Report, however one takes one's view of personal responsibility, it is clear that I had to stand down, and it is for that reason that I do so. Secondly, I want to say thank you to so many people in the House. This 12 years, I cannot think of a single moment where I've come in here where the hair on the back of my neck has not stood up at the privilege of being allowed to sit on these benches. It has been an extraordinary period, and I've listened to so many debates of great wisdom, so many amendments of bills that have improved them, so much hard work. And I've also found that despite the fact I still can't find my way around this building, that the staff here are endlessly patient as I look panic-struck when I suddenly find I'm standing on a green carpet and not a red one, and have guided me to the right place. I am hugely grateful, and I'm very grateful to noble lords who've been kind enough to send supportive and encouraging notes over the last few weeks. It has been a great privilege and strength to have that. Housing, as has been said, is one of the key areas of life in any society.
Ultimately, this is not just about John Smith or even about Justin Welby. It's about an institution that continues to fail those it was meant to protect. And Welby's leadership, which was once hailed as compassionate and reformist, now appears incapable of addressing the rot that has hit the system of the church at its core. And his resignation shouldn't be, it should be the beginning of a broader reckoning, not the end. If there's one message that we should probably take from this episode, it's that safeguarding is not a box to be ticked or a scandal to be survived. It's a sacred duty. And the victims of John Smith deserved better. I think there's room for compassion on all sides, but there isn't room for levity.
Deliberately of communities before you talk about individual houses. My lords, I am hugely grateful to have been here. You remain in my prayers and in my deep affection and profound respect for the huge contribution made by this House to our nation, which it usually does not recognise. And I'm hugely grateful to Baroness Taylor for allowing this debate to happen.
I played you quite a lot of Welby's talk in the House of Lords yesterday, and what is so remarkable about it is how long he goes on. He was supposedly talking about housing. He spent most of the time talking about himself, and while he is interesting, I don't think he's taking the opportunity of addressing and dealing with the people who were most affected by the events over which he resigned, and that is his failing. And that, I think, is a telling failing, and why he needs to go, because he is no longer shepherding his flock, he's guiding himself. And his even when talking about housing, he's more concerned about whether or not he can find a house to move into than whether or not the people who have been so badly hurt by the scandal are safe. And he would be better off. I don't understand why he was speaking in the House of Lords anyway. It wasn't as if he came in and did a speech. He actually stayed for quite a lengthy period of time. And if he's not going to be doing his Christmas services and so on. Again, I don't quite understand why he's taking a jolly in the House of Lords, but I'd be interested to know what you think, and interested to know whether or not you think, as I do, that he speaks remarkably well, but it's all at the wrong time, in the wrong form, and with the wrong audience. As I say, there's no doubting, there's no question that his delivery, that his talk is brilliant. It's just in the wrong place, and it's just in the wrong time, and just to the wrong audience.